Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lawcast. This week, we're taking a trip back in time all the way to 2002 because we're celebrating TNA's 15th Slammiversary. Kyush, if TNA debuted in June, why is Slammiversary in September?
Oh my God, please don't ask me that question. Over time, it's kind of migrated to July, and then it kind of migrated to August, and then it kind of migrated almost to September when Bound for Glory's in October. I don't fucking know, man.
Yeah, kind of sums up the company history, doesn't it?
It really does. And I want to, if anybody out there found out that we were doing this show last week and they were like, oh man, let me watch it so that I can kind of watch along.
Oh boy.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was an inauspicious start. Like, not even like a hilariously bad start, but just kind of a like boring, don't know what they're doing yet start.
I would go so far as to say that this is the worst wrestling show. I'm not going to say the worst wrestling show I've ever seen, but it's up there just because nothing was bad enough to be fun
Yeah,
and nothing was good enough to be good. It was
that's
just all
my
kind
thing.
of groany.
Is like either I want good or really like hilariously bad. Like,
Exactly.
there's just no room for that C minus D plus level stuff.
Like every single time someone's music hits, you roll your eyes. That's not a good place to be.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, the backstory here is the year 2001, we saw the collapse of the wrestling industry. ECW went bankrupt. WCW was sold off for cents on the dollar to the WWF by Turner, and so we went from two massive wrestling companies and one pretty big one to one big wrestling company in the WWF. This left a lot of people without jobs. And probably most importantly was Jeff Jarrett, who had no prospects of ever being signed again by the WWF due to the way he made his exit. So Jeff Jarrett can't get work. Got a dad who is a very respected and famous wrestling promoter, so they started scheming along with a guy named Bob Ryder. What can you tell us about Bob Ryder?
Bob Ryder was ostensibly kind of a backstage everyman. Like he was, I guess technically he was sort of supposed to be like the Kevin Dunn of TNA, and he had done a lot of kind of like programming and production duties with WCW for beforehand, and they were just kind of close friends with Jerry Jarrett. And there's actually it's a fishing trip. That's the famous story. These three go out on a fishing trip, and while they're on a boat, they're just like, hey, what if we had a wrestling company and we did weekly pay-per-views instead of getting TV? And all three
What do
of
you think
them
of that?
now claim credit for this idea.
That business model, is that sustainable in your view?
Gosh, it's so hard to tell. Like, it didn't wind up being for TNA. I mean, eventually
No,
they made it
not at
through.
that point.
Yeah, they made it through about 2 years of doing it this way, and they never went out of business. But it just wasn't profitable.
No, I, I could imagine this working today. Probably, and the problem is, were they $10 each?
Yeah, they were $10.
So $40 a month. $40 a month for B-level wrestling is a lot to ask. I mean, today it feels like the WWE has now set the price point at $9.99 a month, which is tough for anybody to compete with. But that's the whole point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess technically, if they had sold it like a subscription service, maybe they could have made it make more sense, especially for people who were just looking for an alternative. And WWE pay-per-views were already like increasing to $50, so you're still undercutting them a little. But at the end of the day, like this wasn't a subscription service. You had to order each pay-per-view.
Big problem is, yeah, getting people to press that order button every single week is really tough. Like, somebody has to work one week, that night, you're not getting their money. Somebody has plans with their friends, you're not getting their money. You just didn't put it on a good show last week, you're not getting their money now.
And every single show suffers from having to sell the next show. Like,
Yeah.
nothing ever actually comes to a conclusion. No storylines ever really get blown off. Like, it can't. It's a continuous moving thing. It's like if Monday Night Raw had to sell the next Monday Night Raw at some point towards the end.
Yeah, you got to hook them every single week, and that's really tough to do. So, their big hire for creative is, of course, Vince Russo.
Ugh.
Him and Jarrett are tight. Now, this isn't as insane as it seems because this is right after he's been rehired and then immediately quit the WWF. So Vince also brought him back. I feel like that maybe helped. Like, hiring Vince Russo in 2002 is not the same thing as hiring him the other times that they did it. At this point, he's had his great WWF run and his shitty WCW run, and I feel like there was still some question here, like, maybe he just was in a bad situation in WCW and they're in a different environment.
This is probably the single best argument for Vince Russo needs some sort of custodian in order to keep him in line. Because basically what they did was say, like, all right, Vince, you had to deal with the higher-ups and all this bullshit in WCW. It didn't work. But when you had Vince at WWE, that worked. So let's just see what you do by yourself, unchecked. It's a blank canvas for you to paint on. Whatever you want this company to be, that's what it'll be. Go. And what we got was this, like, twisted carnival of mashed up nonsense.
Yeah, it's... So... what they're going for is edgy, adult, we're on pay-per-view, we can do whatever we want. I don't think 2002 was the right time to launch that kind of content. Like, in the 90s, there was definitely a big kind of counterculture, Nirvana, all sorts of, edgy alternative things became mainstream popular culture. I feel like by 2002, after 9/11, like there's a swing back in the opposite direction where things become much more kind of traditional and conservative for a few years in there.
I think you're definitely right. And in WWE, you can kind of see that reflected. Like, as you go into 2002, and especially once you get to 2003, things become... they decide to, like, retrain their fans. Like, not everything's going to be a twist. Not everything's going to be a high spot. Like, we got to get people back to appreciating wrestling for what it is because we can't get any higher than we got.
Yeah.
And TNA, unfortunately, is attempting to go the complete opposite way, and they're suffering from the same thing that WWE was trying to avoid. Like, you can't go higher than the Attitude Era went in that direction. There's no further to go.
Yeah, and in 2002, the WWF was still... I mean, they were still doing, like, HLA and Vince beating up Stephanie, and they were still doing some really, really raunchy out there shit, but it was also not working for them.
Right.
So they named the company Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, TNA, get it, tits and ass. So you and I were roughly the target age demographic at this point. I was like 13. I guess you were probably 16 or 17.
Yeah, I was a junior in high school. I was the demographic.
I thought this was lame as fuck when I heard it. It's
so
2002.
lame.
I was like, that is the stupid... I was 13 years old. Like, maybe a 12-year-old would like that, but it would be a dumb 12-year-old.
I mean, it's literally like if they had just called it, like, NWA 69 420.
Yeah, like, just... and you imagine trying to sell that to sponsors. Like, yeah, the company's TNA Wrestling.
It's like, no, it's Total Nonstop Action. Like, that's totally all it is. It doesn't mean anything else. What are you talking about?
And so we haven't really mentioned this is going to be a Southern wrestling promotion. This is, kind of going back to WCW's Southern roots. They're going to run, Jeff Jarrett's obviously connected in Tennessee. These opening shows were in Alabama. I'll correct from last week. I said the Asylum, but I guess they didn't get to the Asylum until later. This was at the fairgrounds in Huntsville, Alabama.
Yep.
So this is a Southern wrestling promotion. I think that, like, extreme vulgar wrestling is a terrible fit for the South culturally.
Oh my God. It's hard to say that it's a terrible, terrible fit for anywhere because, like, when you look in the crowd, there are people who are into all of that raunchy crap.
Yeah.
But I don't think as much, and I don't think it was anything that could have been long-lived. Like, it certainly wasn't a good idea to be like, hey, this is going to be a totally Southern NWA-style wrestling company, but we're going to fill it full of tits. Like, it doesn't make sense to see strippers in cages next to Ricky Steamboat.
And it's a dumb double standard, but, like, the Southern wrestling promotions tended to be really, really bloody, but like I don't think they did a lot of like sexual angles because that was not cool. These are, you know, respectable church-going folk.
Right. And that's a really good point.
So what I think they should have been going for is basically Jim Cornette's Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Well, I will say, and this is kind of skipping ahead to the first segment, but the one really successful moment of this first show is the part where they bring out all the NWA guys and talk about the NWA title. And it feels like, man, the NWA is great. The title is here. They're finally going to get national exposure again. The NWA name had been dead for a long time, but it's still, it felt like this was a chance to bring it back. Like,
8 years
there's
at
a
this
market.
point. They'd been,
Yeah.
Yeah, WCW had split with the NWA in 93. So it's not that long. And I think the marginal fan they're going for here is not, you know, the internet smart mark. It's more like the older man and woman who like were fans of wrestling growing up, watched wrestling in the 70s, 80s,
Right.
early 90s. And to them, I think the NWA World Heavyweight titles would still mean something. That's, you know, the title they recognize as being the World Championship.
And I think it would have been a really good idea to seek out that sort of 23 to 35-year-old audience, you know, like the older one, not go after the kid audience, because WWE has that. There's no way you're going to wrench it away from them, like especially not from scratch. But there is an audience that feels put out by WWE that there was a place for you to get to, and they could have gone for it. And it seemed like they half-assedly wanted it. They just had no idea how to go about getting it.
Yeah, and I should mention that even though they totally half-assed it, the WWF had done the NWA invasion in '98, so only 4 years before this. You had the NWA title on WWF TV.
I mean, people know what the NWA is, at least at this point. Like,
But in 2017, I think whenever it kind of shows up somewhere, I roll my eyes. But
yeah, Billy Corgan just bought it, and I'm like, good luck with that, buddy. There's literally no way to resuscitate it now.
Especially since you don't get any of the footage with it. Like,
right.
The WWF owns 99% of the relevant footage.
Every single star that the NWA ever had is now more synonymous with WWE. Like, it's over with. You can't do anything.
WWF bought wrestling history. It was a good move.
Yeah, it worked pretty well.
So, what had been going on with the NWA title? Dan Severn was the champion for 4 years, and I don't feel like he ever defended it.
No, it kind of floated around the world a little bit. Steve Corino, they mentioned, had it. I think he actually won it in Japan. Like, it spent some time kind of floating around Japan. I think it spent some time just kind of floating around like Midwest Indies and that sort of thing. Like, there was still a committee at this point. Like, the NWA committee hadn't been disbanded yet.
Who must have been on that committee?
I know Larry Zbyszko was. I think that's the only one that I know.
Of course. Larry Zbyszko is still the rightful AWA World Heavyweight Champion.
Of course, yeah. But like, there was still a committee that had to decide and agree on new champions. And so there's still, TNA would, for the next couple of years, still be bound by that restriction. If they wanted to make a world champion, they couldn't unless the committee agreed on it.
That's what WCW got fed up with. Is like, why? Like, is this name really worth it? And even for TNA, like, I get that the title probably did bring some credibility, but I don't think it was probably worth it to have to put up with that nonsense.
But they would go, like, for reference, they wouldn't drop the NWA until Kurt Angle came in. Like, that's how long it took. Man. He was the first TNA World Heavyweight Champion.
So 4 years then.
Wow.
So Severn was back to being the champion. He had won it in March, but I don't know the backstory. He stripped the title in May, presumably because he was not interested in appearing as part of this TNA promotion.
Right.
The title is vacant coming into the show. And we'll go into, they get some pretty legitimate talent for this show. I mean, obviously, they don't get nearly everybody. Like, no Sting, no Goldberg, no Macho Man, but there's a lot of talent available at this point because WWF has not nearly signed everybody that they ultimately would.
It must be said, this is the most perfect time to open a wrestling company in the history of the wrestling industry. There will never be another window like this. not only do they open in the same year, but so does Ring of Honor, because the glut of talent, both on the indies and coming from WCW and coming from ECW, is absolutely ridiculous. Like, there's just there were so many mid-carders in WCW that could have been main eventers but never got the shot, and now they're just free agents, so maybe you can get that shot with them. Or people who had been waiting to see guys like Conan or Lance Storm or whoever get a push, maybe now you can actually see that. Like, it's a perfect time.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, there will never be this much talent available again.
It is really funny to me, though, that like 1 year after they both closed their doors permanently, a brand new, basically, version of WCW and ECW open up and are still open to this day.
Oh yeah, just B-sides, like. Yeah. So it'll always kill me that the WWF bought WCW for like less than $10 million. Even if you weren't going to run any shows and all you were buying was the tape library, you would have made that money back so many times over with that investment. Like, the tape library alone and the intellectual property was worth more than that. How much difference do you think it would have made? Imagine it's a similar promotion, like similar guys, but it's just called WCW, and they own the WCW intellectual property. How much difference do you think that makes?
I think it would have been easier to get their foot in the door. I think it would have made it easier to get on with more like TV networks and stuff like that would have remembered the name World Championship Wrestling from the good years. I don't think it makes a lot of immediate difference because, again, visually, it's pretty much exactly the same. Like 2001 era WCW and TNA here, very little difference, honestly.
It's very much just a continuation.
Yes. So it's basically the same thing, and everybody just kind of understands that it's just sort of a successor. So I think it may have helped a little bit with advertisers, but when you look at the product that they were putting on, how much help would that have even done?
Yeah. I mean, they would have had to the content would have had to be different to put this on TV, but this is not appealing at this point. It needed a lot of work.
Absolutely not.
Pay-per-view on June 19th, 2002. I don't think it was a good decision to do this live. I don't know what the point of that was. That just cost them a bunch of money.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where WWE does all their stuff live, and WCW did all their stuff live. So I guess we all have to do stuff live.
Part of why WCW went out of business.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to do something just because WWE does it. Like, that's madness.
It's not. They're not competing with WWE at this point. Like, they're on a totally different business model. They should have been taping like at least two of the, like maybe you do two of them one night and two the next night or something. Tape a month over the course of a weekend, and you compress your cost so much. I don't know what they were paying guys. I don't know if they were paying for travel, but it would have saved them a ton of money.
Though it must be said that this was right about when the internet starts becoming like a real issue.
Yeah.
And like spoilers become like a real thing. Like, I can see how they would be concerned about that.
Yeah.
Especially when it's your first show ever.
Sure. So it's at the Von Braun Civic Center in Huntsville, Alabama. About 3,000 people in attendance, and I have no idea how many people bought this thing. Do you have any ballpark?
I believe the first show was a couple thousand. Like, they maintained pretty much between like 2,000 and 5,000 the whole time they were on weekly pay-per-view.
Oh, could that even have been hitting the break-even point?
I can't imagine that they made a dime the entire time. They'll wind up selling this to Dixie Carter, I think, about a year and a half in.
Who was financing it at this point? Was it just Jarrett with his like Vince payoff money?
I honestly think, yeah. I think that's what it was, or his dad with some of his Vince payoff money.
Yeah. So to start the show, we're introduced to the announcers. Mike Tenay, cool. Don West, okay, cool. And Ed fucking Ferrara.
Looks like he just stepped off the fucking set of Battlefield Earth.
Oh my god, he's got fucking dreadlocks.
Not just dreadlocks, like down to his waist floppy dreadlocks. Like, I've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah. Like, this is just how he wore his hair, I guess?
Okay, here's the thing. This is how they decided to do the commentary team for TNA. Mike TNA was a slam dunk for them. Like, he never really got his opportunity with WCW, and it was great. Like, he became the voice of TNA. Great choice.
They couldn't get Tony Schiavone. Mike Tenay's a great choice.
Absolutely. You can see, like, Mike TNA kind of, like, burning with the desire to prove himself as the lead announcer, and he did a great job.
I thought he was good.
Yeah, Don West was literally a product pitch man on QVC who they thought had a lot of charisma, so they brought him on. He didn't know he didn't know a thing about wrestling. Not one fucking thing.
Yeah, I didn't feel like that really showed during this. I thought he did. I mean, I guess he just stayed in his lane.
Well, that was sort of the magic of Don West, and one of the reasons why I love the TNA Don West team and always did is that Don West was just enthusiastic about what he was seeing. He didn't.
And Mike TNA knows enough for both of them.
Exactly. Don, you just need somebody to make you feel like, holy shit, that was impressive. Like, that's all it was. Yeah. He was your voice at home. Like, whoa, what was that? Cool.
Yeah. And Ed Ferrara is here to, like, I guess try to do Bobby Heenan, but he's not at all funny. Like, way too hard to riff on everything. I don't think he got a good line in all night.
No, Ed Ferrara is here to be the voice of Vince Russo in commentary. He's basically here to push the TNA side of NWA-TNA. So he just inputs that into everything that everybody else is saying. It just feels super duper forced.
Yeah. Yeah. Worse than Mark Madden, which is saying something.
Yes.
So they open the show up with a segment honoring NWA legends. This was not supposed to start the show. During one of the dark matches, the ring ropes broke. Hit the ropes and the ring broke. You know, it happens. It's happened in the WWF for this to happen like 10 minutes before they go live.
And famously, literally, while this segment is going on, the Harris brothers are underneath the ring holding it up with their feet. That's literally a fact that is true.
They might be Nazis, but boy, can they fix the ring.
I guess so.
So they bring out Ricky Steamboat, it's really cool to see him because he had like just sort of disappeared after his injury in '94, like hadn't been heard from since. So seeing him's really cool. They got the Funks, both Terry and Dory. They got Jackie Fargo, Bullet Bob Armstrong, who got a big pop. He was in Tennessee and Alabama, and really nice reception from the fans. I think this is great, establishing a different tone because the WWF was more acknowledging history, but not in a big way. The WWF was always more like this moment right now. This is the best stuff. Who cares what came before? This is showing yourself to be something very different and starting the show with people that older fans will know and respect.
Yeah, it was an absolutely great idea. And then Ricky Steamboat cuts a really impassioned promo. Honestly, one of the best promos I've ever heard him cut.
Because I can't think of a lot of good Ricky Steamboat promos.
Exactly.
He was never much of a talker.
He cuts a promo about how important the NWA title was and how important it is to every man who was standing in that ring, and about how it was the thing that you always aspired to and how it was the goal.
Yeah. It's like football players have the Super Bowl, basketball players have the NBA title. This is our Super Bowl right here.
And that's just a brilliant way to start a new chapter of the NWA, is to just have the old chapter be like, this belt is the legacy of the NWA. Forget about what happened before. This belt bridges the gap between Ric Flair and whoever holds it tonight. That's a great idea. And I was watching it with my wife, and I was like, I paused it right after that. And I was like, this show is really good up until this moment right now. If they had
then it goes straight downhill.
Let's say if they had just kept on like this sort of legitimate sport successor to the NWA thing, they might have had something.
Yeah, I understand they want to introduce the big stars. I think they should have just done pre-taped promos with them backstage instead.
I agree.
But instead, we get an episode. We get an episode of Monday Night Raw from 1999. Jeff Jarrett's out first. He takes a shit on the legends, says he doesn't like that it's going to be the gauntlet for the gold because he should just be handed the title or whatever. Orgo, who is the, what they call him, NWA representative or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
Episode, TNA has nonsense bullshit flowchart necessary authority figures set up.
Yep.
He says Jarrett's going to be the first entrant in the gauntlet match. And then Ken Shamrock comes out with his Wolverine mutton chops. He also complains about the gauntlet for the gold. I didn't get it. He's supposed to be a babyface. Babyfaces don't complain.
But then another babyface, Scott Hall, comes out, and he also complains about the gauntlet for the gold. Which, I mean, in the first 10 minutes of this show, the three biggest stars on it bury the main event.
Yeah, like, it's one thing for Jarrett to do it because he's a heel, but like Shamrock and Scott Hall should be like, gauntlet for the gold's great. I get to kick the crap out of 19 other guys. Prove I'm the best because I love competition or something. Yeah. Like, that's Shamrock. Scott Hall's line can be something else, but yeah, the babyfaces should not be complaining about how unfair the match is to them.
I almost feel like Scott Hall's line was a total shoot because he's basically like, yeah, gauntlet for the gold fucking sucks, but deal with it. Let's just do it.
Oh, I mean, Scott Hall is a really good get for them, although he is not in a place where he should have been on TV at this point. Like, he's been fired by the WWF a month before this because his drinking was out of control.
Yeah, this is one of like the 5 times in wrestling history where a sober Scott Hall could have really put a wrestling promotion on the right path, you know?
What could have been. So that is the end of the opening segment. Really should have just killed it after the Steamboat promo. Would have been a great opening to the show. And, like, I guess they needed to stretch it, but they could have found some other way to stretch things.
In fairness, if they had just killed it at the Steamboat promo, that means that the very next thing we would have seen after Steamboat cuts a promo about the prestige of the NWA title would have been Puppet the Psycho Dwarf.
Oh, boy. He says midgets are the real stars and people want to see midget blood.
Midget blood.
He's being interviewed by Goldilocks. I remember her. She stuck around for a while, didn't she?
Yeah, she was their announcer for a number of years.
Yeah. Well, she seemed fine.
Yeah, she was perfectly capable. It's actually TNA actually had this funny habit for like 10 years of just changing out their random like backstage interviewer with another blonde without ever explaining that the former one had left. So you just be like, wait, where did Lauren go? Wait, where did Goldilocks go?
Not important. Jarrett's in the background. He's throwing a tantrum. And then we cut to our first shot of girls dancing in cages.
Yay, dancing in cages. That's just the kind of wrestling me and my kids can watch together.
Yeah, nobody's mama wants to see that. And they need to be going for people's mamas. This is Southern wrestling.
Also, let the record show that, like, the cage dancers at TNA, like, I can't imagine anybody looking less interested in being where they were ever in the entire world. Like, I've been to strip clubs where we're very, very disinterested. Oh, nothing on par with this.
Who do you think
They're just like,
who do you think scouted these girls?
Oh, I'd like to believe that it's Vince Russo, but that just doesn't seem his style. I generally pin everything sleazy and gross about TNA on Bob Ryder because please go on Google and look up a picture of Bob Ryder. He is, I'm not saying that he's a pedophile because that would be slander, but I'm just saying that if you wanted a stock picture for that.
The thing is, I've heard rumors that maybe Bob Ryder would not be interested in the ladies.
I have heard the same rumors, and entirely possible that that's true. I won't claim him for my team.
Yeah. Requires further investigation. Opening match. How about this? AJ Styles, Low-Key, and Jerry Lynn against the Flying Elvises, who are Jimmy Yang and 2 other dudes I don't know. Any idea who these guys are? Like, what's their deal?
Well, Sonny Siaki was a big Samoan bastard. I think he's like a vague member of the family.
They all are.
Yeah, but they tried to make him happen for like the entire first 2 years because he had a great look, but he just didn't have any actual charisma. Jorge Estrada was trained by Dusty Rhodes. They tried to make him happen a little bit, but he was just completely outshined by other members of the X Division, so they'd wind up phasing him out. And then Jimmy Yang is who I think they thought was going to be the big star of this group, because he actually gets the win of this match, and then he gets snapped up in like a month later. Yeah,
no, he is brought into WWE as one of Tajiri's Yakuza henchmen right after this, I believe.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that AJ Styles, it's tough to remember back to a time where AJ Styles didn't have a ton of buzz as like the biggest star in the entire world. But here he is coming off. There was the famous match that made AJ Styles was a match with Christopher Daniels in like the NWA title tournament from like the year before or something like that.
I remember he wrestled on one or two of the like very late Nitros. They brought it. I think they have him wrestle Christopher Daniels on Nitro.
I think Daniels actually left before he did. Styles was kind of teamed up with a guy named like Air Paris, and like they did like a bunch of
Air Paris.
No, there was another dude named Air Paris.
That's confusing as shit.
I know, right? And they just kind of did a bunch of job stuff. They never really progressed past that. It was towards the very end.
He had a really good match, and then like Scott Steiner came out and like butt fucked both of them.
Yep. And I mean, this is a time most of AJ's moveset is completely unrecognizable from the later time. Like this is pre Ring of Honor even AJ Styles.
He looks like 50 pounds lighter than he is today.
Oh yeah, and his haircut.
Got the baby face. I mean, his haircut today is still not great, but yeah.
And I just want to like give a shout, because after this, they realized that AJ Styles is money. They will not actually push AJ Styles for reals for like another 2 years, and not well for like another 6 years. But they will put on him the single worst entrance theme in wrestling history. I was made in the USA. Yeah.
And I really respect Jimmy Hart as a wrestling theme composer. I think he's underrated. But yeah, the TNA music did not
absolute
hit for the
garbage.
Most part.
No.
Yeah, not many stand out. I liked Christian's. I mean, like the better ones were just like blatant rip-offs, which was something Jimmy Hart was always good at. The Christian had the Evanescence rip-off.
Well, by the time that happens, that's Dale Oliver. So I don't think Jimmy Hart's doing those
not
anymore.
Jimmy Hart.
Yeah, so Dale Oliver has a talent for listening to a song on the radio, being like, I can steal the hook from that, and plugging it on in.
So I think it's smart that they use the small guys here, because this is good counter-programming to the WWF, which has not yet established the Cruiserweight division and won't for another year, if I'm remembering this timeline right.
If you want to say that they ever actually did.
Yeah, well, they had a belt a year after this.
Right.
15 years later, they're still trying to figure it out.
Right. And it must be said that this is easily the best thing on this show. Like, it's not very long.
It was a good match.
Yeah.
I liked it.
It's just fun. Everybody's just going, and they're just doing all these cool, fun moves that you haven't really seen a lot of.
Same TNA opening match that they would do every year forever. You know, every show forever. Just put a bunch of guys out there, let them do a bunch of stuff to each other.
Right. But try to think of how exciting this would have been if you hadn't seen it 1,000 times. You'd be like, holy shit, they're doing everything.
And then Elvis's win in 6 minutes, low key does the job. A very different era for him.
Yeah, he's easily the smallest star probably in this entire match at this point, which is really funny because he won't have yet had his run in Ring of Honor that'll make him a star who feels like he's an even bigger star.
Yeah. Next up, we have a terrible midget match. We've got Hollywood against Teo. I get going for like the variety show, a little bit of everything. I'm not into this.
This is so. What I said before about how Vince Russo was given a blank canvas and was allowed to paint whatever he wanted on it. This is one of those things that shows you exactly how talentless Vince Russo is at his heart, in my opinion. This is what he came up with when he had access to an almost unlimited amount of talent. And his basic directive was just reach as many people as you can, get people buying the next show. And what he chose to do was market stuff like this. Like, look, I've seen some amazing midget matches in my day. Like, I've seen Oh man, I've seen like Masquerita Dorada tear the house down in Mexico. That's not this. This is like some white trash nonsense.
The less said about this, the better, I think.
And then we just move right on into something worse.
Man, the next segment is terrible. So we come back, and Don West and Ferrara are in the ring. They are announcing the Miss TNA lingerie battle royal contestants. Just more pure hackery on this show. Yeah, we'll have a bunch of women wrestle in their underwear. It'll be amazing. And they announce the women, and like a few of them are people you know, and a bunch of them are just total no names. Like,
and they've never become
like
names.
I tried to look them up and like couldn't find anything beyond this. So we have Francine from ECW. Okay, that's a star. Miss Joni, who knows? Shannon, who is Daphne from WCW, but they can't use that name. Mickie James as Alexis Lurie. I mean, nobody really knows who she is yet, but Mickie James is a star later. Somebody named Sasha, Aaron Bray, Elektra, Taylor West, Rebecca Briggs. I mean, no idea who most of these women are.
And like Elektra was something that TNA would try to make happen for years. I guess somebody backstage was just really enamored with her, but like, nobody here. And it must be said, like, I'm not trying to judge these poor women who are in this spot, but like nobody here is like outrageously attractive or like, it really feels like lesser than WWE, who was doing, I mean, not dissimilar stuff at the same time, and just had a totally different class of people doing it.
So they get to talk a little bit. It's not very inspiring. I mean, they talk shit about everybody, and Elektra's big line is like, "You're the reason ECW went bankrupt."
Which, I mean, yeah. I don't know how anyone could believe that Francine was why.
No. And then they get in a fight, and they're pulled apart, and that's it. That's the whole segment.
Yes, this is what we were talking about when they were talking about leading to future episodes. This was all to build up a lingerie battle royal next week. So
that must have been a disaster.
It was, my friend. It was.
As an aside, did you actually like order this or like watch it shortly thereafter through other means?
It must be said that in the early days of TNA, and this is so funny, I would actually go on to the oratory on Raja and read the results.
Oh, because, I remember that.
Yeah, somebody used to recap all of the TNAs on there, and I was fascinated by it. But I didn't actually buy one until the one where R-Truth won the title. So the first couple weeks I missed, and then later on I went back and watched them. And then from then on, I would try to order as many as I can, or I would read all the spoilers eagerly. And then eventually me and Vice started ordering them all, whichever one Jeff Hardy debuted on. I think that's the following year.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
So we go backstage to Goldilocks interviewing Mortimer Plumtree.
Sure.
The manager of the Johnsons, who are flesh-colored bodysuits. Get it? Johnsons.
The number of times that on commentary Ed Ferrara tries to make jokes about this, and like, you would think it would be so easy to craft at least one decent joke, or to just like throw up your hands and give up like JR did in the Kennel from Hell match.
Yeah, no, this is how witless he is. He can't make a good dick joke. And I guess I can't shit on this too much because right around this time, the WWF debuted a team named The Dicks.
That is true.
Remember
Weren't they like
guys?
the Stripping Brothers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck. We could do an entire podcast on like really forgettable 2000s WWF tag teams.
Yes, we absolutely could.
So, and in fact, these guys, the Johnsons are one of them because the Johnsons are the Gemini.
Yeah, I always forget that. Like 3 different times people try to make this tag team happen, and they got the look. You know, they're like some big
dudes.
Yeah, big meaty dudes, but they can't really work. It's like there's not much here.
No. So, like, what are they going for with this? Like, I don't know. I guess the thing with the manager is like, oh, this is a guy who was bullied, and like now he's turning the table on the jocks who tormented him.
I want to say this is supposed to be like a homoerotic thing where like this guy's like super obsessed with dicks now. But like, I don't know. Like, what about this? In fact, let me expand that. What about any of the wrestling segments we've seen so far do you think was designed to draw money?
It's just like Vince Russo's whole philosophy is we'll put like crazy, insane shit on TV, and when people are flipping channels, they'll stop to see it.
But that doesn't work on pay-per-view.
Exactly. Like you have to get people in the door first. You have to get them to come back. I don't know who this is supposed to appeal to. It should be mentioned they're wrestling Psychosis and James Storm, which is a really random tag team.
Oh, it is. And it's so funny because they still mention like James Storm, he was on the first ever NWA-TNA show. They never mentioned that he was wrestling a couple of giant dicks.
Yeah.
And he had I didn't like his,
that
I didn't like his adorable pop guns that he had because he's the cowboy. Like I had ones like that when I was like 5 years old.
Yep. Ryan Shamrock shows up for some reason. Don't understand what they were going for here. Curious what it led to, but the Johnsons get the win for some reason.
Yeah, I think it's. I don't know why.
I thought they were the jobber team. Like
I thought so too, but I think James Storm was just being used as a jobber until Chris Harris got a hold of him. But for Psychosis to be on a jobber team is so odd. Like he'll be in like a TNA X Division title ladder match like the following week.
Yeah, total throwaway match here. After the match, Ryan Shamrock like hassles the referee, and then the referee gives her some money. Is she portraying a prostitute here?
Let's try to break this down. If she is a prostitute, why would she come out to collect her money before the sex in the middle of the arena during the match? Like, prostitutes don't come to your job and wait outside until you pay them.
You've been using the wrong
what pimps do. Yeah.
So she what is she called here? She just called Alicia.
Yeah, she's just Alicia. I think Alicia Webb is what she'd eventually be.
I think her real name is Alicia Webb.
I think
she is
too, yeah.
Not Ryan Shamrock's sister. She's just an actress they hired to play that, and they ended up dating. Was the work becoming a shoot? Because I think this was any proposed incest storylines in WWE history.
Yeah, I think this was the first of many.
Many. Another thing we could do a podcast on.
And I think Vince was just like, no, let's not do it. I want to be involved.
Can't blow that off before Vince gets to do it. That would be blowing all the money.
Gotta save that for the boss.
Yeah. Goldilocks interviews the Dupps. One of them is Trevor Murdoch. Did you recognize the other guys?
I had no idea who the hell the other guy was. I know that the girl would wind up sticking around in TNA for a little bit, and they tried to make her into a wrestler, which didn't wind up panning out. But I don't think the other guy wound up being anything. Fun fact about the Dupps also, Vince Russo actually wanted to name Trevor Murdoch Fucked. He wanted that to be his actual name.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. For smart 12-year-olds.
Yeah, so at least somebody was censoring something.
They're rednecks. They share the girl. She's their shared girlfriend. Beer, and somebody shows up to scold them for this. This stuff sucks. That
sadly was Bill Behrens, I think the president of the NWA.
I wonder what's your background to be the president of the NWA in 2002?
I think he just paid. I think he actually physically owned the rights to the belt at that point. I think he had just purchased it and it had passed to him. So I think that was all of the qualification that he had. But I could be wrong about that. Nobody's Googling Bill Behrens to find out.
Nope. Back in the ring, we've got NASCAR drivers Hermie Sadler and Sterling Martin. They get bigger pops than any of the wrestlers on the show.
Sure.
So right now, you fans listening to this, you're surely expecting it's NASCAR. I'm a Yankee, but you know what? Good hit. I'm going to assume they're stars in were stars in NASCAR. Sterling Martin rings a bell to me. I think big NASCAR is huge in the South. Good for the demographic. I think this was a good addition to the show to have these guys there.
Oh, absolutely. I hate to portray a deep level of knowledge about NASCAR, but my stepdad was incredibly interested in it. So I can say that at this point, Sterling Martin was probably the best NASCAR racer in the world, or at least I would classify him as that. So he was a great get. Hermie Sadler was not at all. He is a no-name NASCAR driver, but he was always involved in this because he loved wrestling, and he'd actually wind up founding his own wrestling promotion that would sort of be like their B promotion during the course of the thing.
So then he comes out and he complains about the NASCAR guys being there. He says they're not athletes. They're not my people. Brian Christopher shows up and they run him off and challenges R-Truth for next week and says something about how there will be plenty of his people there next week.
Yeah. The awkwardness of this segment can't really be overstated. R-Truth cuts like a 5-minute promo about what his people do.
Yeah.
And then Hermie Sadler gets up in his face. And it must be said, Hermie Sadler is dressed like it's his first day at Banana Republic and he wants to impress the manager. Like, that's the kind of thing that we're looking at right now. And he's just like, nobody like you should be a wrestler. And then out comes Brian Christopher, who is the only person dressed goofier in the entire world.
Man, Brian, they pushed Christopher hard on this show. What did people see in him?
He could work a little bit, but mostly what they saw in him was Lawler. They always saw Lawler. But it must be said, like, Too Cool was...
don't or can't use the Lawler name.
Yeah. Too Cool was incredibly over about 2 years before this. So I get it.
Yeah. No, I see that. But without that character, he never got over. He never achieved anything.
No, he doesn't have any talent, and he was on drugs or alcohol the entire time, and it's just yet another one of those stories from this era.
What do you think of this R-Truth character here?
I don't like it here, but it must be said that I was probably the only Kate Quick fan in the entire world during his cup of coffee in WWE the first time when he was tag teaming with Road Dogg, getting rowdy. But
you didn't know? You better call somebody.
Kate Quick and Road Dogg getting rowdy. See, that was good.
Right.
This is the only podcast you'll ever hear that sung on ever. But eventually he's going to transition and become Ron the Truth Killings, which A, is maybe the coolest name for a wrestler ever. And B, it really will just start to work. And he'll actually win the NWA title. And his is going to be the title reign that really kind of gets the company on the map and gets people interested. And then they're just going to cut it way, 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 way too short because they had something with him.
Jarrett must
Yeah, it is a shame because honestly, Ron the Truth Killings was primed for to be like a world champion, and they would just piss that away until he eventually go to WWE and was too old to really go for it.
So disappointed when he came into the WWE with a Rapid character. Like I was so hoping they were going to do like the TNA Ron Killings.
Yeah, he'll always be one of those sort of unfulfilled potential guys. Where it's just like, man, if the right company had gotten him at the right point and pushed him right, he could have been a star. But nope, never happened.
Never happened. Backstage, Jeff Jarrett attacks Jackie Fargo. He isn't on the screen. People should be asking, where's Poochie?
It must be said that the money feud on this show, from start to finish, is Jeff Jarrett versus Jackie Fargo. Why?
Yeah. I mean, Jarrett's the only heel they push.
And like Jackie Fargo is the only babyface on the whole show who gets mic time.
Yep. So next up, we've got the Dups against Christian York and Joey Matthews. Why are there so many tag matches on this show?
When this one came out, I was like, this is literally all tag matches. It doesn't make any sense. And they're not good tag matches.
Oh, I mean, like Christian York and Joey Matthews, recognizable ECW mid-carders. They, of course, do the job here to the Dups in 4 minutes. Heel tag teams. They didn't have tag title belts at this point, right?
No, they would eventually have the NWA tag titles, though I don't know if those are also governed by the same rules that the world title is. I don't think so, because I don't
think the NWA ever had proper tag titles. Like every promote, like they may have eventually founded some real ones, but yeah, they did for WCW. I'm remembering this now. It was a Bill Watts thing, but anyway.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what exactly the rules were around that, but eventually they would get some. But tag titles weren't really a big deal for them until America's Most Wanted got a hold of them.
Next up, we've got Toby Keith, courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue. Again, you're expecting me to shit on this, but Toby Keith, huge country star. This was the #1 song on the country charts at this point. This is a more relevant music act than I feel like WWE has ever had.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And to get that musical star to be involved in the show, not just do a performance, but to get physically involved in the show, is more than WWE has ever successfully managed. Like, this is not a bad celebrity involvement. It's not.
Not at all. Toby Keith could have shown up at a WrestleMania in this time span.
Yeah.
I could have seen that happening.
I mean, on a personal level, I rolled my eyes and fast-forwarded through this bullshit. But that's just on a personal level.
Yeah, the song is a little bit of jingoistic nonsense, but
is
that's what the country was feeling at the time.
But we'll put a boot in your ass, Steve.
Your ass, it's an American way. Jeff Jarrett comes out because he's the real country star here, and he's angry that Toby wasn't performing with my baby tonight. And Jarrett tunes him up.
I would have loved it if Jarrett had been like, I'm the real country singer here, buddy.
Sadly not referenced here. Not even like tongue-in-cheek. That actually would have been like a good Ed Ferrara moment if he had like referenced Double J here.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, it's main event time. 20-man gauntlet for the gold. So this is basically a Royal Rumble. 2 guys will just have a singles match for the title. New entry every like 90. You're eliminated by being thrown over the top rope. As per the order of Jackie Fargo, #1 entrant. Buff the Stuff Bagwell is #2. Shit on him on this podcast yet. So let's have at it.
Has there ever been anybody who has been a part of more ridiculous nonsense than Buff Bagwell and still managed to come out almost unscathed on the other end of his career? Like, he's at the same place in his career now that he was like right before he got to WCW. And that seems wrong because he should be buried so far down you'd have to dig a grave to find him.
I mean, he is a gigolo now.
But I mean, he started as the handsome stranger, a gigolo. Then he became one of the American males.
Like, no, he's not a good wrestler, but I thought he was like, I thought Buff the Stuff Bagwell was a good character.
It's so funny because he would be remembered as sort of like a decent character if it weren't for 2 things. One, his mother and his mother's involvement in all of his business dealings. His mother once called up Vince at WWE to tell him that Buff couldn't make it to a show.
I'm pretty sure that's when they decided to fire him.
Oh my God. And the fact that Buff Bagwell
calls in sick for you.
That's the end. Also, Buff is single-handedly responsible for them giving up on the idea of a WCW television show.
That one shitty match with Booker T.
And go back and watch that shit. It's an all-time shitty match.
Buff Bagwell. Why him? Like, Booker T would have torn the house down.
Booker T could have torn the house down with anyone who was at least somewhat physically capable of working a match.
Instead of a worse version of Billy Gunn.
Yeah, he got Buff Bagwell.
Yeah. So Buff Bagwell single-handedly killed the invasion.
He sure did.
Jarrett tosses Bagwell, Rush number 3. Lash LaRue looks like he's been eating a little too much jambalaya down there on the bayou.
Yeah, what a terrible... Like, he didn't have a good look to start with, but damn, he looks horrible here.
Yeah, he's gained like 30 pounds in the year since WCW went under. Jarrett tosses him. Norman Smiley's number 4. Great pop for him. Love screaming Norman Smiley.
Every time I see him, I was exposed to him first not as Norman Smiley in WCW, but as Black Magic in Mexico, where he was one of the most prestigious NWA middleweight champions of all time. Really hard to accept him as Big Wiggle Norman Smiley after that.
But it's so over.
It is. It really was.
Yeah. He goes for the wiggle. Jarrett Blum. Got to make Jarrett look strong.
Yeah, nobody gets over on Jarrett at all until like what happens a little bit later. Jarrett basically just jobs out a bunch of names that you know. That's basically the start of this match.
Analo, I don't know who this guy is. He looked like a stud though. Big Puerto Rican guy.
Yeah, he was a big star in IWA in Puerto Rico, and they tried to make him happen for a number of years. It didn't work because he doesn't wrestle the right style. And kind of Ricky Banderas had this problem when he came to the States too.
Kind of a baby Batista look to him.
Yeah, he's got that look, but he wrestles kind of like an X Division guy. So he doesn't really make use of it, and he's not really good at using his size, and he didn't have any charisma, so it just didn't work.
Yeah. He's about to toss. Jens comes in number 6 and saves Jarrett. The announcers point out that this is a dumb thing to do, but it's any idea if anything came of that?
No, genuinely nothing did. In fact, basically all heels helped Jarrett during the course of this match for no good reason.
Slash is number 7. He's got James Mitchell with this is D13, the Ram Out Nation in
I don't have really any memories of Wolfie D, and I don't really have any memories of Slash either, so that'll just
no
be
notes on Slash.
I don't have any notes on Slash, man.
Guy Del Rios. He is like literally a Mexican Scott Steiner, not with a quite Scott Steiner body, but he's even got like the Superman-esque trunks.
Let the record show it was like they had advertised Scott Steiner, realized they couldn't get him, and they put him in Scott Steiner's trunks with Scott Steiner's hair. They make him Scott Steiner.
Thanks, Scott Steiner. This guy in the WF, same, but you've seen this before. The magician wrestler.
Oh, that was that guy?
Yep.
Oh my God! Maybe the worst gimmick of all time.
One match. Somehow it made TV though.
I guess they were much more forgiving in those days.
Nothing's really happening here. Number 9 is Abyss as Justice. These names are terrible.
That one's actually Abyss's fault because he was Prince Justice on the indie scene before he came in.
10 is Conan. Nice pop for him. He comes in with some fire, hits a bunch of rolling clotheslines.
It's funny because Conan's exactly the kind of guy this should have been built around, right?
Yeah. Conan could have been the top babyface.
Yeah, like really over mid-carders from WCW who never really got a shot at the top. This is what their
Hispanic
opportunity.
Audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joel Gertner comes out next to introduce Bruce of the Rainbow Express. Who the fuck is this?
I don't fucking know.
I don't really want to talk about this because personally, it made me want to set fire to my television.
By Lenny Lane, WCW fame, sort of.
Bruce looked like he had a receding hairline, but only in the middle. Did you notice that?
Yep. It's like a reverse widow's peak.
Yes.
Rick Steiner is number 12. He cleans a little house. He gets rid of Slash and Justice. Malice, because we need more one-named wrestlers. This is The Wall from WCW. That's The Wall, brother.
That's The Wall, brother.
Man, this is... The Wall was like a shit version of Braun Strowman.
I mean, I know I said that they should have used this opportunity to push like unused mid-carders from WCW, but I didn't mean this one. I did not mean The Wall.
Hogan saw so much money in this guy.
Hogan is not to be trusted.
Oh. No, don't believe his lies. He chokeslams everybody and he starts eliminating. Like, he throws out Ron Killings here. And Conan. And Rick Steiner.
They basically used this match to put over him. Like, you would think from watching this that he's going to be like a gigantic star for them.
They put over somebody else later, too. We'll get to that.
Right, but like they make a big deal out of Malice. Malice does not do a goddamn thing in this company.
He tosses Bruce and Del Rios as well. Scott Hall is out number 14. He hits the Razor's Edge on Jarrett, and then Toby Keith shows up. Nice suplex on Jeff Jarrett. And then he and Hall team up to eliminate Double J.
Double G.
Double G, because it's Gonne.
God. This was...
Got Chris Harris is number 15.
Yeah, it must be said, that Toby Keith involvement was maybe some of the best celebrity involvement I've ever seen in a physical match. Like, it delivers a pretty good suplex, and it's over with the crowd. It works.
Probably got some play. No, usually doesn't pull off very well.
Right.
16 is Vampire Warrior. This is Gangrel with black hair. He comes out like right after Chris Harris did. I don't know what happened here. I think they just messed up the cue.
Actually, I think they were running long. I think they were going to get shut down.
Yeah. That makes sense. Devin Storm is 17. Steve Corino is 18. They're starting to come in really fast here, and not much is happening. Is 19. He comes in hot, but then Malice cuts him off. And then number 20 is Brian Christopher. And he everyone.
Brian Christopher eliminates the field.
He eliminates Vampire Warrior, Corino, Harris, and Storm in like a minute. Lex Luger Games push here.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking ridiculous. And then all four of the remaining people just stand around Brian Christopher and debate who's going to kick his ass.
It eliminates Hall. Shamrock eliminates Christopher, so it's Shamrock against Malice for the belt. I can't give a fuck at this point. This has gone on. And now they have to have a match.
And, like, they try. They have a perfectly fine match.
Crowd's kind of into it.
But if this is like Shamrock versus,
probably...
like, Conan, you have something here, right?
Yeah, but if you want to put Shamrock over as the face, you don't want to put him against a cooler face like Conan. You could do Shamrock against Jarrett, but Jarrett will be here.
Well, let me just ask you the question. Would this have just been a better show if this is just Shamrock versus Jarrett in the main event?
Oh, sure. They could have had a good match.
Absolutely.
Rather than talk about this match, Shamrock wins in 5 minutes. Biggest star Ken Shamrock should have been. This guy should have been Brock before Brock.
Oh, absolutely.
Not huge like Brock Lesnar, but in some ways, I mean, Brock's got kind of a goofiness to him in that as soon as he opens his mouth, like, the voice doesn't match the guy. Like, Shamrock doesn't have that problem. Like, Ken Shamrock in charisma and danger and don't fuck with this guy.
In terms of credibility, there might never have been anybody on this level like post Andre. Like, in terms of like, well, yeah, that guy could beat everybody's ass, sure.
The world's most dangerous man. And they didn't make that up. That was ABC News that did a segment about him entitled that.
And like, imagine that level of like mainstream press being like, this is the biggest badass in history, and let us gift him to you, WWE. And they never did a fucking thing with him.
This guy who whooped Royce Gracie's ass, who is the toughest guy from this super taboo underground fighting promotion that at this point had been banned in like every state but Wyoming. And yeah, what does the WWF do with him? He comes in, he's the referee for Austin and whatever. He has a really cool match with Vader where they just shoot on each other, and like Vader ended up in the hospital after. Was just a guy, like wrestles the British Bulldog at SummerSlam and has a feud with The Rock where he keeps getting fucked out of the Intercontinental title and nothing. Like,
I think it's one of those things where he was a piece. I think he was a piece that didn't really fit in that era of WWE. And it's so funny because any other era of any other wrestling company, he would have been world champion.
Couldn't have been in that era, but like him and Austin promoted properly would have been huge money.
Oh, hell yeah.
Like the toughest shoot fighter in the world against the world's most dangerous man against the world's toughest SOB. Like, you just put those guys on a poster.
It's just kind of amazing that they never went there. They seemed obsessed with the idea that he was a babyface, which I think wasted a lot of time.
He was over as a face. I thought the crowd got him. I think the crowd kind of naturally got behind him.
And they were behind him here, too. Like, people were ready for him to win a world title.
Yeah. He's a terrible fit for the Russo style because Russo only wants guys who can cut promos. And, like, the less Shamrock says, the better. Like, I talked about him, like, in contrasting him to Brock, but it's similar in that the more he talks, the more he's going to become just another guy.
But it's funny that you say he's a contrast to the Russo style, because as we mentioned, if this had been an NWA show with Ken Shamrock being crowned the new champion, I think that's a major success.
Absolutely.
I think that's a great fit. It's a great idea. Here, we'll never know how successful it could have been because Ken Shamrock basically only signed like a 1-month deal and was gone like 3 weeks later.
Yeah, this is the thing. He has a huge fight coming up against Tito Ortiz. I think him and Ortiz fought in November. And that, at the time, was the biggest UFC pay-per-view ever. Kind of put map after they had like been banned everywhere and the initial hype had kind of fizzled out. Shamrock and Ortiz was huge. And so I think they're going for Shamrock to be doing that fight like while he's the NWA champion and be able to kind of coast off that, but I don't think UFC was cool with that.
No, I don't think so either. And you can kind of tell that fight's coming up because if you go back and watch this Battle Royal, Shamrock takes exactly 2 bumps from the moment he gets in to the end. 2.
Yeah. Does he ever even defend this title?
I can't remember if he vacates it or if he drops it to Killings or something like that. I think he drops it, but I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, but nothing comes of this. Like,
no,
they built this first show around him becoming champion, and absolutely nothing. Cause they were paying him, but it was probably like $1,000 a night or something. Like, can't match the UFC pay.
Right.
So, like, afterwards, the legends come out to congratulate Shamrock. And then Jarrett shows up and beats every Jarrett. Hall and Jarrett get into it as the show ends, and that's our hook for next week, is they're going to fight. Not a bad way to end the show, but a pretty dire dire show overall.
Yeah, completely agree. It wasn't a successful opening of the brand. It didn't successfully put over anybody except Jeff Jarrett. It wasn't a success by any stretch of the imagination. The fact that this company is still around 6 or 15 years later, or whatever it is fucking ridiculous.
Watching this, you would have thought they're done in 6 months. They just wouldn't give up. They just wouldn't tap out. Like, no matter how much money they lost, no matter how little interest there was, no matter how many TV deals they lost, commitment to keeping this going. I think it's just willpower from Jeff Jarrett and then from Dixie Carter and now from now.
And it's worth mentioning that in the 15 years that TNA has been around, they were probably actually over and with genuine momentum for about 2. That is, even WCW wasn't that bad.
Oh, no. WCW had, I mean, it depends on what we're calling WCW, but like certainly in the late 90s, they had about a hot 4-year run. Right. And then Jim Crockett Promotions was huge in the 80s, in the 70s, and going way back. But yeah, I mean, TNA has now lasted longer than WCW did. I mean, WCW, if you count it from like the very end of 88 until they closed the doors, 15 years, and TNA is going on 15 and seemingly not going anywhere.
It's really just evidence that you can run a wrestling promotion without actually being successful basically forever.
No, yeah, it's amazing. As long as somebody is always willing, not care if they're making any money, you can pretty much keep your vanity project going forever.
Pretty much.
So, yeah, the weekly pay-per-views continued for about 2 years. Then they went through the weird era where they were buying TV time on local Fox Sports stations. That's when I first started watching. I kind of read about it on the internet before that, but I remember watching the Fox Sports show, and it was kind of interesting, but not particularly good. And then, like, right as they were about to run out of money, lost the WWE and made a deal with them, and the rest is kind of history.
Absolutely, and we might do that First Impact someday too, because there's a really good story around it, and that is an amazing way to debut a product. Like, that show is everything that this show is not, and actually they kind of coasted off of that momentum for a long time. But before we get out of here, let me ask you the question that sort of plagued all TNA fans of that period. Should they have built the product entirely around Jeff Jarrett as their top star?
Initially, yes, because what's the other option? Like,
right.
Who's going to show up? Who you can count? Like, can't count on Scott Hall. Can't count on Ken Shamrock. Rick Steino. I mean, they don't have any other stars. Like, somebody's got to be the world champion.
Right. Honestly, if it were me, I probably just would have put the belt on Jarrett here and then had him keep it for like 5 years until somebody was actually a star ready to take it. But that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jarrett's your long-term champion, and then somebody just beats him, and then that's your guy. The problem is, guys kept beating Jarrett. They used Jeff Jarrett like he was Ric Flair, and like
right.
He's not, as he's demonstrated throughout his career, he is not Ric Flair.
His entire career as a Ric Flair cosplayer has not been very successful.
No. And this is the problem is, somebody would beat him and then the title would just come right back to him a month later. And they repeated that for just years and years and years.
Oh, yeah. Until eventually Kurt Angle came and took that exact spot away and did the same thing with him.
Yeah, but Jarrett stole his wife, so call it even.
Yeah. Get it, Jarrett.
Ooh. All right. I think that wraps us up for the first NWA-TNA. What a terrible, terrible wrestling show. Don't ever watch this.
I'm so sorry again if you unfortunately watch this. I did not tell you to watch this. Please don't watch the shows until you've heard if they're good or not. Please.
We watched it so you don't have to.
Exactly.
And I think that's going to be what we're saying about our show next week. it's getting to be autumn. The leaves are going to be turning soon. So we're going to look at a WCW Fall Brawl circa 1990. Not a pay-per-view, a Clash of the Champions. And what have we got on this show? Well, we've got some really weird stuff. We've got a main event of Sting against the Black Scorpion.
Black Scorpion.
What else have we got? Lex Luger against Ric Flair for the United States title. That sounds like a good one.
We got the Master Blasters.
Stan Hansen against the Z-Man, Tom Zank.
Tony Schiavone's favorite wrestler.
And Cush's favorite wrestler.
Hey, I have an awesome story, if you haven't heard it, about Tom Zank in our blog that I will share next week.
I can't wait to hear this.
It's pretty good.
And some other really weird stuff, because WCW in the early 90s was one of the weirdest wrestling companies there's ever been.
Yes, it was.
So you've got all that to look forward to next week. Cush, anything before we wrap up?
No, I think this is a good one. Once again, we have proven that my TNA fandom that I've held for 15 years is completely misplaced, and I feel horrible about myself.
Lost cause.
Lost cause.
Ooh, all right. I think that does it for this week. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope we got you back next week.